I'm Veronica Hayes, 35, and just last month, I got the same message I've received every year for the past decade. Sorry, sweetie, not enough room for you at the Outer Banks house this year. By evening, I learned my parents had invited 118 guests, including all 5 of my siblings, their partners, kids, college roommates, and even some church friends. Everyone but me. For years, I've been the invisible daughter, even with a thriving career as an interior architect in Philadelphia. This wasn't oversight. This was routine exclusion. But this year, I wasn't playing along. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit that like and subscribe. You're going to want to hear how this one ends. The Outer Banks retreat wasn't just any summer trip. It was a family legacy. My grandparents, Margaret and Charles Hayes, began the tradition nearly 50 years ago after discovering the wild beauty of the Carolina coast during a long road trip in 1977. "This place belongs to us," Grandpa would say, hands behind his back as he gazed at the dunes. And he meant it. By 1985, they had purchased a sweeping beachfront property in Nag's Head, where sea oats bowed in the breeze and every sunset seemed painted by hand. I spent every childhood summer there, building sandcastles, collecting shells, and racing barefoot across the wooden decks with my siblings. My oldest brother Nathan was always organizing volleyball tournaments, while twins Sam and Sarah pranked each other endlessly. My sister Jill loved combing the tide pools, and baby Ben was Grandma's favorite shadow. But it was me Grandpa Charles took on sunrise walks along the shore, camera slung over one shoulder. He saw something in me before anyone else did. "You see lines and spaces where others see emptiness," he'd say as I sketched driftwood and cottages. "That's design. That's art." He bought me my first drafting kit. On the back porch, he'd sit beside me for hours while I traced floor plans in the salty air. "Your talent will carry you far," he'd whisper. "Don't ever shrink for anyone." When I chose design school over the finance degree my parents pushed, he and Grandma cheered the loudest. My father, Stephen Hayes, president of a logistics company, barely looked up from his steak. "You'll be broke by 30, he muttered. And my mother, Elaine, always perfectly poised, sighed and passed the butter. That was the last summer I saw my grandparents. They passed just weeks apart during my junior year. Their passing left an ache none of us could fill, but my grandparents had made it clear. Their beloved beach house was meant to keep us together. In their will, they left it jointly to my parents, along with a handwritten letter expressing one heartfelt wish, that the summer retreats never stop. They didn't. But the spirit of the tradition shifted. My parents, Stephen and Elaine Hayes, took over planning. What had once been barefoot cookouts and sunset card games became orchestrated showcases. My father started inviting colleagues from his logistics firm, and my mother turned the retreat into a social mixer for her charity board friends. The house, once a haven, started feeling like a showroom. Still, I buried myself in work. While my classmates partied through design school in Manhattan, I pulled all-nighters building a freelance client base, logos, packaging, restaurant interiors, anything to prove I could make it. By graduation, I was already billing more than some junior designers at firms. Now, I run Hayes Studio, my own design consultancy in Philly. We handle projects from boutique hotels to major lifestyle brands. But to my parents, that's still just arts and crafts. The first time they left me out of the retreat was 3 summers ago. I remember the text arriving just 2 weeks before. "Hey, V, keeping it small this year. Just immediate family. Hope you understand. Maybe next time." I stared at the screen, stunned, but I rationalized it. Maybe they really were downsizing. Maybe they needed bonding time. I tried not to let it break me, but when photos started showing up online, the truth cut like salt water in a fresh wound. There were bonfires on the beach with over 50 guests, siblings, cousins, childhood friends, even one of my dad's junior partners. I wasn't forgotten. I was intentionally left out. When I asked my sister Jill about it, she replied with a forced smile. "Mom and Dad assumed you'd be buried in deadlines like always. You know, work." Each of my siblings had carved a place in our parents' world. Nathan, 38, lives minutes from them, and just got promoted to vice president at Dad's firm. Jill, 36, is married to a well-known surgeon. The twins, Sam and Sarah, 34, became real estate attorneys. Ben, 30, is a pediatric specialist. And Lily, 28, teaches at a private academy, married to a rising star in wealth management. And me, 35, single, child-free, and the only one not wearing a suit. Running some design thing, as my dad once said at dinner. The outlier, the misfit, the one never invited back, for 2 years straight. Each year, the same not enough space message arrived. And each year, social media quietly told the truth. I kept up the act, shrugging it off, pouring energy into Hayes' studio, and convincing myself I didn't need them. But this year shattered whatever denial I had left. It was early June when I stumbled across it. Just a mindless scroll through Instagram before bed. My brother Nathan had posted a picture. A glossy printed itinerary, tucked inside a welcome packet, captioned, "Counting down. Biggest Hayes family retreat yet. Can't wait." I squinted at the photo, tapping to zoom. There it was. 118 confirmed guests, printed right across the top. Below that, a schedule divided by group activities: sailing, wine tastings, yoga, beach Olympics. My breath caught in my throat. I could make out familiar names even in the blur. Jill and Mark, Sam and Sarah, Ben, Lily, all my siblings, cousins I hadn't spoken to since college. Aunt Celeste and her husband, even Dad's college roommate Frank and his wife, people I'd never seen at these retreats before. But not me. Not even a whisper of me. Fingers shaking, I messaged Nathan. "Retreat looks amazing. Huge group this year." His reply was instant. "Yeah, gonna be epic. Mom and Dad went all out this time." I replied casually, "Wow, 118 people? That's got to be tight at the beach house." He responded without hesitation. "Oh, for sure. Dad's been stressed trying to fit everyone. They actually rented the 2 houses next door to handle overflow." That's when it hit me. They had space. They had more than space. They made room for 118 people, but not me. I set my phone down and walked numbly to the window, staring out at the Philadelphia skyline glittering beyond my apartment. The tears came before I could stop them. Hot, silent, unrelenting. Miss, it wasn't about space. It never was. My body collapsed under the weight. I slid to the floor, pressing my back to the wall, hugging my knees. The tightness in my chest, the shallowness of breath, it all came crashing in. I remembered when my portfolio won a national design award, and my parents skipped the ceremony to attend one of Sam's law firm dinners. The Christmas I got a generic $25 gas card, while everyone else opened curated gifts. The family portrait that cut me out completely when they made it their holiday card. When I could finally move, I grabbed my phone and called Grace, my best friend since Parsons. She picked up on the second ring. "They did it again," I whispered. "The retreat?" Her voice, soft but unsurprised. 118 people, Grace. She didn't ask what happened. She just let me cry. They rented extra properties to accommodate everyone. That wasn't just hurtful. It felt calculated. It was deliberate exclusion. "Am I overreacting?" I asked aloud, my voice thin over the phone. Grace didn't even let me finish. "Stop! Veronica," she said firmly. "This isn't about space. It never was. This is about control and punishment. They're punishing you for living a life they didn't choose." Her words sat heavy in the air because I knew she was right. My parents never truly forgave me for choosing art over finance, for walking away from the carefully crafted blueprint they'd drawn for all their children. I didn't marry young, didn't join a firm, didn't move back to North Carolina. I didn't follow the plan, and they never stopped making me feel it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, memories surged forward. The Thanksgiving when my father went around the table boasting about each of my siblings' professional milestones, Jill's hospital expansion, Ben's medical research. But when he got to me, he waved his hand and said, "Still doing her art thing." Or the Mother's Day brunch, when my mother, champagne flute in hand, leaned toward me and said, "Of course, I'd love more grandchildren, but you'd need to find a husband first." She smiled like it was a joke. It wasn't. It was always these small, sharp jabs. Reminders that I didn't quite fit. Around 3 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and called Jill, knowing she'd likely be awake with her new baby. "Did you know I wasn't invited to the retreat?" I asked the second she picked up. There was a long pause. "Mom said you were swamped with work." "Did anyone ask me if I was?" I snapped. "Or did they just assume?" "You know how it is," she said carefully. "Mom and Dad send the invites. It's their thing. They invited 118 people, Jill, and they rented extra houses. It wasn't an oversight." Another pause. Then, "You know they don't really get your lifestyle. Maybe if you reached out more?" "My lifestyle?" I said coldly. "You mean my thriving design studio? The national features? The clients who trust me with million-dollar spaces?" "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is," I cut in. "You're just saying it nicely. You think being different means I deserve to be left out." "You should talk to Mom." "I'm done talking," I said and hung up. It wasn't a miscommunication. It was the same pattern, and I had let it repeat. But as morning light spilled across my living room, catching on the Gold Leaf Award I'd won last year, I felt something shift. I had built something extraordinary, on my own terms. And I was done asking for a seat at a table I helped build. And I had spent years chasing approval from people who were never going to give it. The idea came quietly, not as revenge or a plea to be included, but something altogether different. If my family refused to make space for me, maybe it was time I created my own space, on my own terms. My first instinct was pure fire, to call my parents and unload every buried emotion, to post the truth online for every cousin and neighbor to read, to show up at the Outer Banks house uninvited, stand on the porch and dare them to turn me away. But as I sipped my morning coffee, my eyes drifted to the framed photo of my grandparents on my bookshelf. They stood barefoot in the sand, arms wrapped around each other, wind in their hair. I could hear Grandma Margaret's voice as clear as if she were beside me. "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." They had shown me, repeatedly. No phone call would change that. Instead, I opened my laptop and scheduled a video chat with Diane Romero, my former design professor and longtime mentor. When she answered, her signature red glasses sat slightly crooked, and her expression was instantly warm. I told her everything about the exclusion, the lies, the guest list. My voice cracked more than once. "I don't know what to do with this," I said quietly. "I can't keep pretending it doesn't sting." Diane leaned forward. "Veronica, when the world shuts you out, creators create. When you're excluded, you build something inclusive. When they shrink you, you expand." I blinked. "Are you telling me to host my own retreat?" She smiled. "Exactly." Later that evening, I began browsing properties in Nag's Head, just to see. That's when I found it. Pelican Cove Estate. 6 bedrooms, coastal chic interiors, private dune access, ocean view decks, a fire pit, and available the exact same week as my family's retreat. The price made me hesitate. I'd been saving for a condo deposit. But this felt like claiming something for me. The next afternoon, I had lunch with Rachel Nguyen, a client-turned-friend who owned a top-tier event planning company. I had branded her business the year before, and we'd stayed close ever since. "You're really going to do this?" she asked as I laid out my idea. "Not just a getaway," I said, heart pounding. "A creative minds retreat for designers, writers, artists, people who value beauty, storytelling, soul." Rachel's eyes lit up. "I love this, and I'm in. Let's make it unforgettable." Rachel and I spent the entire afternoon in creative flow. She suggested a local chef she'd worked with before, someone who specialized in fresh, seasonal coastal cuisine. I started listing artists and designers who could lead creative sessions, hands-on workshops in watercolor, interior mood boarding, and storytelling through space. We sketched out the vision: sunrise yoga on the upper deck, paddleboarding and photography walks along the dunes, evening bonfires with live acoustic sets, and open mic storytelling under string lights. You'll need a brand, Rachel said, tapping her pen against her notebook. Website, private socials, make it feel exclusive, elevated. I've got that part, I grinned, already seeing the visuals in my mind. Clean typography, soft linen textures, warm tone photography. It would look as intentional and inspired as the retreat itself. Over the following week, I blocked out 2 weeks of vacation from my design studio, transferred a hefty portion of my condo savings into the retreat fund, and booked Pelican Cove Estate. Then came the invitation design. Grace was at the top of the guest list, no question. Then a handful of close friends from Parsons and past client projects, people who cheered me on when no one else had. My college roommate Lila and her husband, both creatives in their own right, were next. After some hesitation, I added Heather and Nathan, the only 2 of my siblings who had ever expressed genuine interest in my work. Heather had once asked me for branding help for a nonprofit she supported. Nathan had complimented my website on a rare family Zoom call. As the names filled in, my energy surged. These were people who saw me, who respected what I built and loved me without qualifiers. I poured myself into the website, high-resolution images of the estate at sunset, activity descriptions that sounded like poetry, and sleek profiles of our workshop hosts. The retreat's private Instagram page launched 2 days later, featuring a short teaser video with the tagline, "Where creative souls gather." Doubts crept in at night. What if no one comes? What if it looks like I'm trying to fake a family? What if it all falls apart and I'm left broke and humiliated? But then, I'd look back at the retreat page, the names confirmed, my own name at the top. 2 weeks after Nathan's Instagram post, I had 22 confirmed guests for the Creative Minds retreat, scheduled exactly when my family would be hosting theirs. Heather's RSVP came with a note. "This sounds amazing, Veronica." Way more my vibe than another stiff family dinner. Nathan politely declined. "Wish I could make it, but the kids would mutiny. Thanks for thinking of me." And honestly, that was enough. As I finalized the details, something unexpected settled over me. Not the sting of exclusion or anger, but a calm sense of purpose. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to my family. I was creating something for myself. Booking Pelican Cove Estate had been just the beginning. The property was breathtaking. Sleek coastal architecture, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the Atlantic, a chef's dream kitchen, sprawling decks, and even private beach access with paddleboards and kayaks. But turning it into the haven, I imagined, meant sweating the small stuff. Rachel had become my co-strategist, working her event planning network to get everything we needed at insider rates. Together, we hired a local Outer Banks chef who focused on sustainable, seasonal ingredients, lined up a housekeeping team, and booked a professional photographer to document the experience. "People should see what you're building," Rachel said one night. "Not just your family. Everyone who's ever been told they don't belong." Every evening after wrapping up client meetings, I worked late planning session guides and coordinating with the creatives leading our workshops. Miranda, a ceramic artist based in Asheville, would lead a hand-building pottery session on the back deck. Troy, a nature photographer I'd met at a design expo, would host dawn photo walks along the dunes. Grace was designing a creative journaling session with prompts based on nature, silence, and self-acceptance. It wasn't just an event. It was a tribute to the kind of joy and wonder my grandparents, Margaret and Charles, once fostered. I remembered summer nights on their dock, wrapped in beach towels, listening to Grandpa's stories about the constellations overhead, Grandma's habit of arranging wildflowers in mason jars around the house. Those little touches, never flashy, always thoughtful, made everyone feel loved. But the financial pressure was real. As invoices piled up, I took on extra freelance projects, branding packages, a last-minute restaurant menu redesign, working into the early hours just to ensure I could fund the retreat without completely draining my savings. Some nights I panicked. Was I doing too much? Was this a reaction disguised as a mission? But then, I'd get a text from Miranda or a DM from a guest saying they couldn't wait, and my doubt would evaporate. Then, just 1 week before the retreat, everything cracked. The catering company called. They double booked. They were backing out. I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by candles, name tags, and snack basket supplies, the color draining from my face. I called Grace, my voice shaking. I can't believe this. 22 people expecting meals for 5 days, and I've got no chef. Okay, she said calmly. We'll fix this. Let's figure it out. Together. Breathe, Grace said gently over the phone. This is fixable. Let me make a few calls. Within 3 hours, she connected me with Sophia Jameson, a personal chef trained at the Culinary Institute of America. She was between long-term contracts, living in Durham, and, miraculously, free the entire week. After reviewing the menus I had already crafted, Sophia suggested a few refinements, more locally sourced ingredients, lighter lunch options, and a coastal tasting dinner for the final night. What had begun as a disaster turned into a blessing in disguise. An unexpected upgrade. The day before the retreat, I loaded up my car, every inch packed with welcome basket supplies, signage, decor, extra yoga mats, and hand-stamped retreat journals, and headed south from Philadelphia. When I arrived at Pelican Cove Estate, the afternoon sun bathed the dunes in soft gold, and the ocean shimmered through the panoramic windows. For a few minutes, I sat in the driveway, hands still on the wheel, overwhelmed. I had done this, not out of spite, not out of desperation, but from vision, creativity, and self-worth. The property manager greeted me with a quick tour, handed over the keys, and disappeared down the sandy path. I stood alone in the living room, the vaulted ceilings soaring above me, the ocean calling through the open balcony doors. This space was mine for 1 week, and I could fill it with whatever energy I chose. That afternoon, I placed a woven basket on each bed. Locally made candles and soaps, Outer Banks chocolates, miniature sketch kits, custom journals with the Creative Minds Retreat logo, and a handwritten note to each guest. For Heather's basket, I tucked in a faded photo I'd found of the two of us at Grandma's kitchen table, elbows deep in glitter glue and paint. As I finished arranging the last basket, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Hope you're enjoying your summer, honey. Anything special planned for next week? I stared at it, numb. They still thought I didn't know. They still believed I'd swallowed their silence like always. I didn't reply. Instead, I stepped out onto the balcony, snapped a photo of the sea-meeting sky, and posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Let the Creative Minds Retreat begin." Emerging from the shadows. I knew my siblings followed me. I knew word would spread, and for the first time in years, I didn't care. Guests began arriving just before noon. Grace pulled up in her vintage powder blue Volvo, followed by Troy and his partner David. The second they stepped inside, their eyes widened. "Veronica," Grace breathed, taking in the light-filled entry. "This is unbelievable! You've truly outdone yourself." More guests arrived by the hour, some I hadn't seen in years. There were hugs, laughter, awe. By sunset, the house radiated with exactly what I'd hoped for: creativity, connection, and joy. Sophia, our new chef, arrived with her assistant just before dinner and got straight to work in the kitchen, filling the estate with the scent of roasted herbs and warm bread. As she prepped our welcome feast, I guided guests to their rooms, helping them settle in. By sunset, all 22 attendees had arrived, including Heather, who pulled me into a hug the moment she stepped inside. "This is incredible," she whispered. "I had no idea you were planning something like this." I glanced at her. "Did anyone else see my Instagram post?" Heather hesitated, her smile flickering. "Mom asked if I'd heard anything about it. I just told her I'd be spending the week with you." I gave a small nod, grateful. "Thank you for being here. Really." That night, our welcome dinner surpassed even my highest hopes. Sophia served a multi-course coastal menu: grilled shrimp over sweet corn risotto, seared scallops with citrus beurre blanc, and a lemon lavender tart for dessert. We ate under string lights at a long wooden table on the back deck, the ocean breeze drifting through, laughter rising with the clink of glasses. When the time felt right, I stood. "To creativity," I began, my voice clear, "to connection, and to creating our own traditions." The table erupted in applause. As the evening unfolded, guests snapped photos and posted to Instagram, tagging the retreat's private account. By sunrise, my phone buzzed with notifications, not just from attendees, but from my family. The first text came from Nathan. "That place looks incredible. What's this retreat thing about?" Then Jill, "Mom's asking why Heather's with you and not at the family gathering. Just FYI. I didn't respond. Not yet. The morning began with David leading sunrise yoga on the deck, followed by a breakfast of locally sourced pastries, fruit, and honeyed tea. Troy led a group on a photography walk through the dunes, while Miranda fired up her pottery wheels on the back patio. I barely looked at my phone until lunch, but when I did, more texts had rolled in. Sam had messaged, "Saw the retreat pics. Looks amazing. Didn't realize this was happening." The tone was unmistakable. Why wasn't I invited? But the biggest surprise came on day 3. We had just returned from a sailing excursion when I spotted a woman standing calmly on the dock, sun hat in hand. It took a moment, but I recognized her. "Aunt Eleanor?" I called out, helping her steady herself. "What are you doing here?" She waved a hand. "Saw some photos on that Instagram thing," she said. "Figured it was about time someone in this family remembered how we used to do things right." "Recognize the view," Aunt Eleanor said as we stood on the dock. "I was supposed to be at your parents' gathering, but this looked far more interesting." At 84, Aunt Eleanor had always been the family outlier, traveling the globe as a foreign correspondent while other women of her era settled into domestic routines. She never married, never apologized, and never stopped asking questions that made people squirm. That evening, after most of the guests had retired to their rooms or gathered around the fire pit, Eleanor and I sat on the back deck with a shared bottle of her favorite scotch. Neat, no ice. "Your grandparents would be proud of you," she said suddenly, lifting her glass to the stars. I blinked. "For the retreat?" She shook her head gently. "Not just for this," she gestured to the glowing house behind us, "but for staying true to yourself despite Stephen and Elaine's disapproval." "You know about that?" I asked, surprised. "Of course I do," she said, sipping slowly. "I've watched them sideline you for years. So did Charles and Margaret. It broke their hearts." The validation, so clear, so simple, hit me like a wave. My throat tightened. "I've tried so hard to earn their approval," I admitted quietly. Eleanor turned to me, eyes sharp. "Some people's approval isn't worth earning. Your grandparents knew creativity wasn't just a hobby. It's a way of seeing, of being. They saw that in you from the start." That moment with her, truthful, loving, honest, brought me back to center. This retreat wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about honoring the part of myself they could never understand. The next afternoon, just as we gathered on the deck for lunch, my phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. By the third ring, I excused myself and stepped inside. "Veronica, where are you?" Her voice was sharp with concern, layered under control. "Eleanor was supposed to arrive at our gathering yesterday. She's not answering her phone." "She's here, Mom. With me." Silence. "What do you mean with you? Where is here?" "I'm hosting my own retreat this week. Aunt Eleanor decided to join us." "You're in Nag's Head?" The shock in her voice was almost funny. "But we told you. There wasn't enough space." "I know exactly what you told me," I said calmly. "And I also know you rented extra houses and hosted 118 people. So I created my own space." Another pause. Then, flatly, "We need to talk about this. Your father and I are coming over." Before I could speak, the line disconnected. I stepped back onto the deck, breath shallow. Grace was the first to notice. "My parents are coming," I said softly. "They know." Grace took my hand. "Then let them come. You're not alone anymore. If you've ever stood your ground against those who tried to shrink you, hit that subscribe button, because what happens when Veronica's parents show up? You won't want to miss it." An hour later, my parents' black Mercedes eased into the circular driveway of Pelican Cove Estate. I met them outside, not wanting to disturb the workshop happening in the great room where Miranda was guiding guests through a hand-building clay session. My mother stepped out first, her sharp heels crunching softly on the gravel. She gave me a once-over, her gaze drifting to the elegant house behind me. What exactly is going on here, Veronica? I'm hosting a creative retreat, I said evenly, for friends and colleagues. Since I wasn't welcome at the family gathering, I made alternative plans. Not welcome? My father's voice rose, his face flushing. We simply said there wasn't enough space. For one person, I finished for him, while you invited 118 others and rented extra homes. Let's not pretend this was about space, Dad. My mother's expression twitched, somewhere between irritation and unease. We thought you'd be busy. You're always buried in your projects. My projects are my career, Mom. A career you and Dad have never once acknowledged. The words flowed not with heat, but with clarity. Years of silence unspooling at last. You've excluded me from 3 years of family events. You downplay my achievements while elevating my siblings. You've made it painfully clear where I stand in your pecking order. My father opened his mouth, then faltered. Through the windows behind me, the retreat attendees were laughing and sculpting with Miranda, soft music playing in the background. Who are all these people? He asked. People who value me, I said. Friends, clients, colleagues, people who make space for me. I held their gaze, then added, and Heather's here, by the way. She chose to be part of this. My mother's face dropped ever so slightly. Veronica, if you felt excluded, you could have just said something. Would it have changed anything? I asked softly. For the first time in my adult life, my father didn't have an answer. He looked around, eyes skimming the property, the guests, the experience I'd built from the ground up. Maybe we should talk privately, he said finally. No, I replied, calm and certain. I'm hosting an event. My guests deserve my presence. Then I added, if you'd like to join us for dinner, you're welcome to. As guests, not as parents here to scold their daughter. They exchanged a quick glance, startled, unsure of this version of me, the version that no longer asked for a seat but built her own table. Dinner's at 7, I said, turning toward the house. Veronica, my father called. I paused at the door but didn't look back. This is impressive. What you've done here. My father's voice trailed off. It wasn't an apology. Not quite, but coming from Stephen Hayes, it was as close as I'd likely ever get. I nodded once and walked back into the house, where the people who chose me were gathered. My chosen family, the ones who saw me clearly. That evening, my parents did stay for dinner. At first, they were visibly uncomfortable, hovering near the edges, offering tight smiles. But Aunt Eleanor's commanding presence smoothed the edges. She made casual introductions, dropped compliments about my studio's national features, and made sure my parents heard, from others, just how far I'd come. They listened as Grace, Rachel, and others spoke about collaborative projects, my mentorship, and the lasting impact of my work. By the time dessert was served, Sophia's decadent chocolate tart with sea salt, something in the air had shifted, not dramatically, but perceptibly. As they were preparing to leave, my mother said softly, "Next year, we'll make sure there's space for you at the family retreat." I smiled politely. "Thanks," I replied, but I made no promises. I'd built something real, something I wouldn't trade just to sit at their table again. Over the next couple of days, messages trickled in from my siblings. Reactions were mixed. Brian sounded almost insulted. "Didn't know you were planning something like this. Guess my invite got lost?" Lily was sweet but confused. Amanda was defensive, towing the parental line. Nathan, surprisingly, sent a thoughtful message. "You deserve better from all of us. I see that now." But the biggest shock came from Sam, who showed up unannounced on the final full day. "I told Mom and Dad I needed air," he said, sheepishly scratching his neck. "But honestly, I just wanted to see what you built. It looked incredible online." I gave him a tour, introduced him to the guests, and invited him to join our final dinner. Watching him loosen up around creatives, laughing, asking questions, I glimpsed the curious little brother I'd once shared sketchbooks with. The retreat ended on a high. Guests exchanged contacts, planned collaborations, and asked about returning next year. More importantly, I felt changed, certain of my voice, my value, and my power to create meaningful tradition on my own terms. On the final morning, I was helping pack up when a familiar SUV pulled into the driveway. My parents again. This time with Amanda in the back seat. I met them outside. "We thought we'd help you pack," my mother offered, her voice overly casual. "That's not necessary," I said evenly. "We've got everything under control." Amanda stepped forward. "Veronica, can we talk? Privately?" I hesitated, then nodded, leading them toward the garden path, sunlight cutting through the trees. "This has gotten out of hand," Amanda began. "You've made Mom and Dad feel terrible." "That was never my goal," I said honestly, but I was done accepting exclusion as normal. "There was just a misunderstanding about space," Mom added. I turned, gently but firmly. "No, Mom, it wasn't about space. It's never been about space." My father, quiet for once, finally spoke. "You're right." The words floated in the air between us, unexpected, heavy, and honest. My mother turned to him, surprised. "You're right," he repeated, this time looking me directly in the eyes. "We favored your siblings. We dismissed your career. And we excluded you. Because we were disappointed you didn't take the path we wanted." It hurt, but it was real. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. He gestured toward the house. "This? What you've created here? These people who clearly respect you, admire you? It's opened my eyes. We've been wrong." My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye with a tissue. "We didn't understand your world, Veronica. It felt unstable, risky, compared to your siblings' choices." "You never tried to understand," I said gently. "You never came to my launches, never asked about my clients, never celebrated my work." "You're right about that too," my father said. Then, with effort, "And I'm sorry." Coming from Stephen Hayes, those words were as rare as snowfall in July. A tightness in my chest began to ease. "I can't promise we'll change overnight," he continued, "but I'd like to try, to learn more about your world." Amanda shifted uncomfortably beside them, unused to this level of honesty from our father. Then she asked, "So, will you come to the family retreat next year?" I considered her words. "I'm not sure," I said truthfully. "I might host my retreat again. It's been healing." My mother stepped in carefully. "Maybe we could coordinate dates next year so they don't overlap. You could attend both, or part of each." A small gesture, but it felt genuine. "I'd consider that," I replied. At that moment, Grace appeared at the edge of the garden. "Sorry to interrupt, but we're ready for the closing circle whenever you are." "I'll be right there," I said, then turned to my family. "You're welcome to join us, as participants, not spectators." My father gave a small nod. "We'd like that." As we walked toward the house, Amanda leaned in. "Sam hasn't stopped talking about yesterday. Said it's the most relaxed he's felt in years." The closing circle was a tradition borrowed from my art school days. One final gathering, a place to speak freely and reflect. We sat on cushions in the great room, forming a quiet circle, the light from the windows casting soft patterns on the hardwood floor. One by one, voices rose, sharing gratitude, insight, healing. And for the first time in years, I felt seen by everyone in the room, including them. When it came to my parents' turn in the closing circle, my father cleared his throat, clearly out of his comfort zone. "I'm not much for public speaking, unless it's about quarterly projections," he began, drawing a warm laugh from the group. "But I want to thank Veronica for letting us be a part of this. It's opened my eyes to a world I didn't understand before." His words weren't poetic, but they were sincere. After the ceremony, as guests packed up and exchanged numbers, my parents pulled me aside near the kitchen. "We'd like you to come to dinner next week," my mother said softly. "Just us. To talk." I nodded, then added gently, "I'll come. But I need you both to understand something. I'm not changing who I am, or what I do, to earn your approval. That's not up for negotiation." My father met my gaze and surprised me again. "We know. Maybe it's us who need to change." After they left, I rejoined the others for our final lunch. Aunt Eleanor sat beside me on the deck, a twinkle of mischief in her wise, knowing eyes. "You know," she said, sipping her sweet tea, "sometimes the family you create is more important than the one you're born into." I looked around at the long table. Artists, clients, friends, people who had chosen to support and celebrate one another. "I think you're right," I said. "But," she added, squeezing my hand, "it's nice when both can coexist. Give them a chance, Veronica. Not for their sake, for yours." As the afternoon wore on, the house slowly emptied. Heather was one of the last to leave. She pulled me into a hug so tight I nearly cried. "This was transformative," she said. "I've been so wrapped up in earning Mom and Dad's approval, I forgot how good it feels to just create, to connect, to breathe." "You're always welcome at my table," I told her. Sam had extended his stay and helped me load the last of the supplies into my car. As we locked up the patio doors, he hesitated. "I'm sorry, Veronica." "For what?" "For not seeing it. For going along with it." I looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, I didn't see the corporate suit our parents shaped. I saw the boy who used to build sandcastles with me at low tide. "Maybe we all can do better," I said. By sunset, I was alone on the deck at Pelican Cove, watching the light melt into the ocean. The retreat had been a success, not just professionally, not just socially, but deeply personal. I had turned exclusion into belonging, rejection into creation, hurt into healing. I didn't know what the future held for me and my family, but for the first time, there was space between us. Not distance, but possibility. As I locked the door for the last time, I whispered a quiet thank you to my grandparents, to my friends, and to myself. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would never again shrink myself to fit into spaces too small to hold the fullness of who I am. The drive back to Philadelphia gave me time to reflect. As the coastline faded in the rearview mirror and the winding highways carried me north, I felt like I was returning home. Not just physically, but emotionally evolved. The Creative Minds Retreat hadn't just been a one-week event, it had been a pivot point. When I stepped back into my apartment, everything looked the same. But the energy had shifted. The same walls that had once held my tears of exclusion now echoed with pride and purpose. I unpacked slowly. Extra welcome basket items, name tags, the printed itineraries, the group photo from our closing circle. Each object was a quiet monument to something I had built with love, intention, and courage. The next day, the responses began pouring in. Emails from attendees filled my inbox, messages filled with gratitude, stories of breakthroughs, and requests for next year's dates. Troy wrote to say he'd landed a gallery show in D.C. after sharing his retreat photos. Miranda said 2 guests had commissioned large ceramic installations for their homes. Grace had already created a group chat for Creative Minds Retreat alumni, and people were exchanging ideas, booking collaborations, and making plans to stay connected. What had started as a defiant response to exclusion had blossomed into a living, breathing community, a tradition, a movement, a sanctuary for people like me. A week later, I kept the dinner promise. I arrived at my parents' Chestnut Hill home with open curiosity but guarded expectations. The conversation was stilted at first. Old patterns don't vanish overnight, but there was a noticeable shift. My father asked about my business, not just surface-level chatter, but real questions. Clients, contracts, the expansion I'd hinted at during the retreat. My mother even pulled out a ceramic bowl she'd bought from a local gallery, asking what I thought of the glazing technique. Over dessert, my father cleared his throat. "We've been talking about the family retreat." I braced myself. "We think it's gotten away from what your grandparents intended," he continued. "Too many guests, too formal, too much networking. We're scaling back next year," my mother added. "Just immediate family, like it used to be." I nodded, appreciative, but non-committal. "That sounds nice." Then came the surprise. "We'd like to come to your retreat next year," my father said. "Just for a day or 2, if that's okay, to see your world more clearly." The request was unexpected. Stephen and Elaine Hayes voluntarily stepping into a circle of artists and designers. But this time, I smiled. "You'd be welcome." It wasn't an apology for years of exclusion, but it was a step toward understanding. "I'd like that," I replied simply. The weeks that followed brought a mix of healing and friction. Some of my siblings reached out, others remained distant, and I learned to meet each response without expectation. Heather and I began meeting every Saturday at a quiet cafe in Rittenhouse Square, reconnecting like women, not just sisters defined by childhood roles. We talked about life, art, and pressure, things we'd never shared before. Nathan invited me to his son's school art show. It was a small, quiet gesture, but one that meant more than I think he knew. Sam called from time to time, asking about my studio's projects, sounding genuinely curious, like he wanted to understand what I did, not just pretend to. Amanda remained firm in her defense of our parents. She'd say things like, "They did the best they could," or, "You're making this bigger than it is." I stopped trying to change her mind. Brian and Lily stayed on the sidelines. Watching, I imagined, unsure of how to enter this new, shifting family dynamic. I accepted that. Every sibling had their own path to walk. During this time, I also started therapy, something I'd put off for years under the guise of being too busy. Dr. Michaels helped me see the roots of it all, how being the different one shaped my sense of worth, how I'd craved validation, how despite everything, that craving had once limited me. But the retreat? It changed everything. "You stopped asking to be included," Dr. Michaels said one session. "You built the inclusion you were seeking. That's power." Professionally, the retreat opened more doors than I expected. Attendees shared their experiences online, and within weeks, I was fielding new client inquiries, podcast invitations, and even a request to speak at a national design conference about fostering creative communities. Then, 3 months after the retreat, Aunt Eleanor called with news. "I've been thinking about the family property," she said. "It was never meant to be a status thing. It was meant to nurture, to connect, just like your retreat." She'd already spoken with the trust lawyer. "As the last surviving sibling, I've requested 1 week each summer be set aside for a creative retreat under your direction." I was stunned. Tears welled in my eyes. "Your grandparents saw your gift," she said gently. This is what they would have wanted." The trust lawyer confirmed the change the following week. Even my parents didn't contest it. "Your retreat was impressive," my father said on the phone. And for once, I believed he meant it. Maybe it was time for the family property to host something meaningful again. As I began planning next year's Creative Minds retreat, this time at my grandparents' beloved Nags Head estate, I reflected on the journey that had unfolded over the past year. What had begun with the sting of exclusion had blossomed into something far greater than simply being included in someone else's event. I'd learned that rejection often serves as redirection, that forging your own path can be more fulfilling than following one laid out for you, that the family you choose can hold as much meaning, sometimes more, than the one you're born into. Most importantly, I realized my worth wasn't tethered to my parents' approval or my siblings' acceptance. It was inherent, expressed through my creative work, the authentic relationships I nurtured, and the courage to stand unshakably in my truth. The family dynamics weren't magically healed. Deep-rooted patterns rarely unravel so easily. But there was movement, awareness, and the flicker of real change. I'd set boundaries without burning bridges, carved out space without shutting doors. Looking out from my Philadelphia apartment at the city skyline, I thought about all the people who might feel diminished, excluded, or forgotten by those they should matter to most. The retreat had become a blueprint, a way to respond to rejection with creation instead of despair. Next year's gathering would be even more intentional, more inclusive, more vibrant. I opened my laptop, fingers poised above the keyboard, feeling my grandparents' spirit gently guiding my hands. Sometimes, the most powerful answer to being told there's no room for you is to build a space so magnificent others long to belong. Not born of resentment, but from self-worth. Not competition, but abundance. I had done exactly that. In doing so, I didn't just change my family's perception of me, I transformed how I saw myself. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated by those closest to you, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below and share how you've reclaimed your voice or created your own space when others tried to hold you back. Your support means the world to me. It reminds me I'm not alone in this journey. And if you're facing similar struggles, remember, your worth isn't defined by others' approval. Stand tall, set your boundaries, and build a life that reflects your true self. Together, we can inspire each other to turn rejection into strength.